First, imagine your entire country erased in a single generation. Cities burned flat, factories reduced to twisted steel, 2 atomic bombs, millions dead, an empire gone overnight. In 1945, Japan didn't just lose a war, it lost everything. Its industry was shattered, its currency was worthless, its people were starving, inflation was running wild, the government was occupied by foreign troops, and yet, within 25 years, Japan would become the second largest economy on Earth. By the 1980s, it wasn't just rich, it was unstoppable. So what happened? How does a nation go from radioactive rubble to exporting the cars, electronics, and machines that power the modern world? And more importantly, could it happen again? To understand Japan's rise, you have to start with humiliation. After surrendering in 1945, Japan was placed under American occupation, led by General Douglas MacArthur. The country was demilitarized, its constitution rewritten, its military dismantled. But here's the irony. The destruction that wiped out Japan's old system also cleared space for something new. Before the war, Japan's economy was dominated by powerful family-controlled conglomerates called zaibatsu. Names like Mitsubishi and Sumitomo. They controlled banks, factories, shipping, everything. After the war, the US initially tried to break them apart to prevent another militarized economy. But then something changed. The Cold War began, and suddenly, Japan wasn't just a defeated enemy, it was a strategic asset, sitting right next to Communist China and the Soviet Union. Washington needed Japan stable, fast. So, instead of punishing Japanese industry, the US shifted to rebuilding it. American aid flowed in, technology transferred, markets opened. But here's the part most people miss. Aid alone doesn't create miracles. Systems do. Japan built a system that was disciplined, coordinated, and quietly ruthless in its efficiency. The government, through an agency called MITI, the Ministry of International Trade and Industry, began guiding the economy, not like a dictator, more like an air traffic controller. It didn't run companies directly. It nudged them. It decided which industries would get cheap loans, which technologies to import, which sectors to protect. Steel, shipbuilding, automobiles, electronics. Banks were at the center of everything. Instead of companies raising money through stock markets, they borrowed heavily from banks tied to industrial groups. These networks became known as keiretsu, loosely connected alliances of firms that owned shares in one another. That structure did something powerful. It removed short-term pressure. Companies didn't have to obsess over quarterly profits. They could plan for decades. They reinvested relentlessly, upgraded machinery, improved quality, cut waste, and they focused on exports. This is where the math gets interesting. Japan had almost no natural resources. It had to import oil, iron ore, food. The only way to survive was to sell more to the world than it bought. So it built products the world couldn't ignore. In the 1960s and 70s, Japanese cars entered the American market. Smaller, cheaper, more fuel efficient. When the oil crisis hit in 1973, gas prices soared. Suddenly, those compact Japanese cars from companies like Toyota and Honda didn't look cheap. They looked smart. Electronics followed. Sony televisions, Panasonic radios, precision machinery. Quality became the obsession. There's a story about American engineers in the 1950s dismissing Japanese goods as low-quality knockoffs. By the 1980s, American executives were flying to Tokyo to figure out how Japan was beating them at their own game. The growth numbers were staggering. From 1955 to 1973, Japan's economy grew at an average annual rate of nearly 10%. 10% for almost 2 decades. It was called the Japanese economic miracle. But miracles usually hide leverage, and leverage hides risk. By the late 1980s, Japan wasn't just confident, It was euphoric. Stock prices soared, real estate prices exploded. At one point, the land under the Imperial Palace in Tokyo was said to be worth more than all the land in California. That wasn't wealth, that was a signal. Credit was cheap, banks were lending aggressively. Asset prices kept rising, which justified more lending, which pushed prices even higher. Sound familiar? In 1989, the bubble burst. Stock markets collapsed. Real estate values fell for years. Banks were left with mountains of bad loans, and Japan entered what became known as the Lost Decade, which quietly turned into 2 decades. Growth slowed to a crawl. Deflation set in. Wages stagnated. The same tight coordination between banks, corporations, and government that fueled rapid expansion now slowed painful restructuring. Stability became inertia. The system that once looked invincible revealed its trade-offs. But here's the twist. Even after decades of slow growth, Japan remains one of the richest countries in the world. Its infrastructure is world-class. Its life expectancy among the highest globally. Its companies still dominate high-precision manufacturing, the invisible components inside machines most people never think about. So, what's the real lesson? It's not that Japan rose because of aid, and it's not that central planning magically works. It's that Japan aligned 3 forces at once: long-term capital, export discipline, and national coordination. For a time, those forces compounded together, but compounding works both ways. When demographics turned, with an aging population and low birth rates, growth slowed. When asset bubbles inflated, debt multiplied. When global competition intensified, margins compressed. No system is permanently miraculous, only temporarily optimized. And today, as countries debate industrial policy, supply chain independence, and strategic manufacturing, Japan's story feels strangely current. Can governments successfully guide industries without creating bubbles? Can long-term coordination outperform free market chaos? Or does every miracle contain the seeds of its own slowdown? Japan lost everything in 1945. It rebuilt with discipline. It soared with precision. It stumbled with excess. And it endured. The uncomfortable truth is that wealth isn't just about resources or even innovation. It's about structure. The rules you build, the incentives you create, the risks you tolerate. Japan proved that a destroyed nation can become an economic superpower within a generation. The harder question is this: when the next crisis resets the global economy, which countries will have a system ready to rise from the ashes, and which ones are building their bubbles right now?